Okay, so let's get started with this webinar. Welcome everyone to a pivotal discussion on the current state of talent management. My name is Raviola. I'll be your host today, and we will embark on an exciting journey on how to build a future-ready workforce. So, what are the challenges of attracting, developing, and measuring high-performing talent? And how can we really approach this are the key questions we will be dealing with in this webinar. And you will come out enriched with new information and know-how how to proceed in your organization. Today, we have the privilege of navigating these waters with two visionaries, David Ludlow, who has been with SAP for over 2 decades actually, and Filip Misovski, who is the CEO of Siemens Cloud. Before we start today, I will just quickly introduce Siemens Cloud. So we are an independent software company providing HR tech solutions for more than 10 years by now. We have successful enterprises on our client list, and there's more than 35 from the Global Fortune 500 in our client list right now. Our partners are successful enterprise software vendors such as SAP, Microsoft, Oracle, and others. And we have 4 solutions that comprise our employee experience suite, including Job Points, which is our flagship solution for recognition and rewards. Then there's skills and growth, nurture, and well-being. Today's agenda. So here's why you should stay tuned. Because in this interview between David and Filip, we will discuss innovative approaches for building a future-ready workforce. Then we'll discuss some practical applications of AI in HR, backed by real-world wins. And we'll also discuss how organizations such as yours have leveraged AI tools to streamline recruitment, enhance employee engagement, and optimize performance management. And just to say very quickly, if you have to leave early, don't worry, because we're going to send the recording to everyone who attended and registered. So here are our speakers today. On one side, we have David Ludlow, who's been the Group Vice President for Solution Management at SAP SuccessFactors. And he oversaw a team dedicated to market trend analysis and solution strategy development across the human experience management suite. And with his 25 years of experience in HR solutions, he ensured SAP delivers top-notch HXM solutions to its customers. He was recognized as one of the top 100 tech influencers by HRE and the HR Technology Conference in 2019. And on the other side, we have Filip Misovski, who is also a visionary in the realm of business technology. As the CEO of Siemens Cloud, he brings to the table over 2 decades of rich experience, having honed his skills in SAP and Oracle as well. And under his leadership, Siemens Cloud has emerged as a comprehensive platform that's transforming companies, enabling them to align their strategic objectives with their cultural ethos. I just want to quickly set the tone for today's discussion. This is just some of recent quotes, recent statistics that will set the tone and give us a little bit of context. So there is 54% of hiring professionals who say flexibility encourages retention, and 51% agree it attracts candidates. Another interesting statistic here is that 66% of business leaders agree that strategic education programs attract new talent. And finally, 93% of CEOs undertaking upskilling programs report increasing productivity at their organizations. So as a conclusion of these 3 statistics, offering flexible work arrangements can be a powerful retention and recruitment tool. That is one thing. Another is that investing in education and skills development can enhance talent acquisition. And finally, continuous learning directly impacts leadership effectiveness and organizational success. And with that, we are going to proceed to our interview. David and Filip, thank you very much for being here today. Would you like to say hello before we begin with the questions?
Yeah, of course. Hi, everybody. Great to be here with everybody today.
Hi.
Hi from my side as well. And maybe just before we start the interview, so David and I go a long way back. When I started my career after college 25 years ago, David was one of my first mentors, or back then, I don't think product management existed. So he was like the key project leader in, developing our US-based solutions, HCM solutions, on-premise solutions on the market, particularly with payroll and so on. So I think we've shared quite a long history over the time, and it's great to have him back, and full circle now after his journey with SAP and my journey 5 years ago. We are excited to kind of reflect on everything we've learned from those 2-3 decades of being part of this exciting HR software industry.
Great, and with you two sharing such a history together, I'm sure this discussion will be very fruitful. Okay, so shall we begin? I'd like to pose the first question, which belongs in the realm of the evolution of HR technology, just to give a little bit of background context. So, David, could you provide us an overview of how HR technology has evolved from its early days to the current era of AI-driven solutions? And also, additionally, how has the landscape of HR technology changed over the past 30 years, particularly with the shift towards cloud-based solutions?
Yeah, okay. So I think that as we look back over the last 25, 30 years, you can probably, or at least I would argue, that you could identify probably 5 distinct eras of HR technology. And, you say going back to the early days, so that probably goes back to the old mainframe days, right? In the 80s, where that was the first time, one of the first times HR actually had technology dedicated to it, where some of the key benefits associated with that were things like automation, process efficiency, kind of moving from a paper-based environment over to a technology environment. But one of the challenges there was it was very restricted to only a few people or only a few users who underwent deep training to understand the system because they were not always the most usable things that were there. Next era, we get into client-server technology, probably late 80s, early 90s, and into 2000, which really started with the graphical user interfaces associated with client-server. That now opened up a new set of users, particularly managers and employees, who were now enabled using some of the HR processes because it was a more engaging and usable user experience for the end users. Now, one of the limitations, of course, with client server was it did require every end user to have technology running on the desktop. There were not really laptops back then, but on the desktop. And so the next, I would say, era was getting into internet technology. And I think this accelerated probably the employee and the manager self-service opportunities in that we didn't have to have all of this technology sitting on a desktop. It made it much more feasible and cost efficient for organizations to roll out some of these employee and manager self-service different scenarios to their users. And then number 4, we can probably identify as cloud. And cloud, I think, probably has some of the most impactful change on HR, because all of a sudden, HR is not tethered anymore to central CIO controlled technology in the organization. HR is now enabled with cloud to identify their own solutions they want to buy. They have their budgets, and they can go out and procure the solutions that they need with regard to how HR needs to run in the organization. Once again, without always having to first go to the ERP platform or to be necessarily have the CIO or IT as the gatekeeper. This had an interesting, I think, additional trend associated with it, and that because I think that there were so many new buyers opened up with cloud, what you saw was an explosion, if you will, of new innovations and new technologies that started entering the HR space. And in fact, I think a couple of years ago, we had counted over 2,000 startups in the HR space alone. So I think this is another byproduct of cloud in that it not just gave buying decision and power to HR, but it also facilitated, I think, this explosion of growth in innovation when it came to HR processes. And now we get into AI, and I think this is kind of the next. the next generation, if you will, I guess, of HR technology and HR software. It for sure, it will enable us to even accelerate automation, more than what we've seen over the past eras associated with the technology. But I think really fundamentally what it enables us to do is completely reimagine employee and manager self-service. AI can be suggestive, it can recommend, and it can generate content from unstructured data. It can look for patterns. I think, some of the challenges we've had with employee manager self-service in the past is we can give the employee the process, but there's still often a lot of complexity associated with the process. The employee doesn't know the configuration. They don't know the business rules. They don't know the HR policies and procedures behind all that. And so what we've ended up doing many times is through employee manager self-service, just exposing the employee and the manager to some of the complexity of the HR processes. And I think that with AI entering the scene, AI can actually bring some simplicity and some rationalization maybe to some of the processes that are there and enable the employee to understand them more effectively, or just bypass the complexity and just be presented with maybe a suggestion or recommendation with what they need to do without having to know the underlying process or the configuration underneath it.
Great.
Thank you.
David, appreciate the big picture of kind of the 5-step change that we've
with
been
30 years
through.
of HR technology, I guess I've seen each era up close. So.
Luckily I didn't see the mainframe piece, but I heard about it. I entered there with you around the client server. And speaking of that, I mean, just to put it in context, you mentioned the second big wave, and I think this week or last week there was the big retirement from Hasso Plattner, who is the person who's really ushered the client server era. So this second step, going from mainframe to client server or on-premise delivery, is something that Hasso and his small team back then ushered in the R3 system that, I don't know if customers still use it, but definitely there's still a lot of on-premise deployments. And 5 decades later, we're still seeing the major impact of that, not just SAP as a company, but also to customers who gain a lot of efficiency and productivity from having such ERP systems that basically consolidate, as you mentioned, all the functions into modules, including HR. Yes, very much bound to the CIO or even the CFO who was paying for it. And then the other thing that what's interesting, I believe, to see as we have this major evolutionary steps on the technology. For me today, I visited a customer and I realized that, we hear about it, but it was so impactful to me that there's actually a huge cultural evolution that's happening in our world of work, in customers. The environment that David and I knew back then when we met in Palo Alto for the first time, which was very advanced, very high tech compared to traditional industries. And now, when I entered a client today that's 50,000 employees here in Germany, the procurement person was actually not German. The HR expert and leader for this particular topic was also not German. The spoken language was Spanish when I entered the room. And they were young. We're looking at early 30s that are driving relatively big decisions. So quite a big demographics change. If I remember when I came to Germany, I was I felt like I was the only non-German within a modern high-tech company like SAP back then 20 years ago. Now, that is happening across any industry, across the world. It's not just, Europe that's being affected. This demographic change, the cultural change, and they come with different expectations. So certain things that were done, 30 years ago, let's say, celebrating anniversary for 25 years, that was like that was the only milestone that in Germany, for example, this company was celebrated, and they received the golden watch. That is so outdated, right? Knowing the fluctuation, knowing that people, do not stay 25 years, unless you're David Ludlow or, right? There's a very few examples out there that get to achieve this milestone. And then the award itself, it's not something you wake up, you're like, wow, I really want to get this golden watch, and stay with this company. Oh, my background is going all crazy. Anyways, so I think, huge technological change that we see, the HR processes, the self-services, the way employees, managers, even HR interact with the system. At the same time, huge cultural change that is happening in organizations. We always hear about COVID that obviously even created the ultimate acceleration of change. So I think that's something also we need to put in perspective, that there is a business kind of environmental change as well as there is technology change that really, when the two come together, I think that's where we'll see the biggest impact. David, what do you think about this kind of cultural change? Have you seen that with customers as well? From the early days when you were serving the front runner customers to now, something like Success Factors with over how many 10,000 almost customers. How that has affected your, let's say, role and your view on HR technology?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's been a cultural shift there, with globalization, with, some of the new technologies coming in with different ways of thinking. Yeah, it's fundamentally different than it was before. Totally agree.
Excellent. All right. Yoya, back to you.
Okay, thank you. Well, with David's 5 epochs and a very nice detailed overview of the evolution of HR tech, and Filip's remarks on the culture change and how accelerated this shift in HR is right now, we're moving on to trends in talent management. So I'd like to ask David, considering the historical impact of talent management modules, what trends do you foresee shaping the future of HR tech at this moment?
Yeah, so I think that this is really where AI can play a huge role with regard to how we may want to rethink or reimagine what talent management is and the processes associated with it. If you think kind of the larger picture of talent management, there's one unifying set of data that kind of bring it all together, and that data is basically skills. Skills, competencies, abilities, all those things that I can do, and all of those things that I possess as an attribute. Now you can expand some of the concept of skills as well and talk about, personality and behaviors. Do I have the skill to do a job, but do I have the right personality or behavior to do a job as well? So I know in SAP, we call this whole self, looking at both hard skills data and more soft personality attribute data, and that kind of thing, which I think we'll see as probably increasing importance as well. But I think the point I want to make is that we as HR have been struggling with skills for 40 years, ever since the early days when Naomi Bloom did a lot of her work in this, and she called it a KSOC: knowledge, skills, competencies, abilities. I think it was an acronym, somewhere along those words. But skills are not easy. I may possess skills, but I don't know what they're called. I don't realize in many cases I even have a skill. Skills change all the time. And, with some of the new technologies and new business models and new ways of thinking and globalization, there's new skills entering and there's old skills that are being depreciated out, and things I don't care about anymore. So it's become a much more dynamic environment on top of an already complex environment to begin with. And I think that this is one of the areas that AI can really help with regard to discovering skills, identifying skills, suggesting to an employee that they have a skill, recommending to a talent administrator that a new skill has come into an organization and that a job description should be updated and that kind of thing. So I think that this is really one of the areas of opportunity that is real this time. We've looked at other things with regard to skills over the years and, thought we found a solution, but it really wasn't. I think this one actually has the opportunity to stick and really kind of provide a new environment to where skills are much more easily managed going forward. With that skills data then, which is much more robust, accurate, rationalized, with using the same terminology and that kind of thing, that then provides a foundation to provide better upskilling, reskilling. It will put the career development in the hands of the employees much more effectively than was ever done before.
Okay. I think Filip has something to add when it comes to soft skills versus hard skills, but David, very
Sure.
great that you pinpointed this.
Yeah, I mean, skills has really become the kind of the new foundation layer for HR systems. I mean, if let's say the HR core system with your people data and your hierarchies, and let's say the core self-services and transactions was the table, was the kind of the base foundation for the last 30, 40 years. It seems like now the notion of getting skills right with hard skills as well as soft skills is kind of the next foundation for the next talent management. I think we hear talent intelligence as the new word that's being used interchangeably, which the basis of that is having a skills model. And I think it's a heavy undertaking, what we see from customers, that it's not something, it's not like a talent management module that you can turn on or off, or add on you can put in, or something you can just extend based on your existing talent management or your HR core systems. It really goes in the core of many processes, many talent management processes, as well as what David mentioned. Employees are empowered to kind of drive their career and see how that is progressing. For us, in terms of Seamless Cloud, we are very excited about the soft skills part, the behaviors part, because we believe that's where we can add a lot of value. We believe through a lot of the feedback messages as well as the recognition messages, we can automatically suggest and build out capabilities, soft skills capabilities profile of a person that is validated. It is not just I think I have this skill and kind of in a biased way, but really something recommended from others that they're seeing. And then what I've seen recently and what really makes it important, this is not a static view of the skill. It's not like the skills that David and I had 30 years ago when we met are the same skills that we have now. I saw a statement, something like the half-life of skills, and I don't know if this was probably related more to hard skill, right? Because soft skills, I think they stick around a little bit longer and you keep improving, is something around like 2.5 years, right? So I know myself, when I started SAP, I was a payroll developer, and I went through I think 3 months of extensive travel and training to learn with customers and from SAP educators and professionals of what is an HR system back then, what is payroll, how to develop in ABAP, and there were these 101 classes or 305 classes that we had to go through in order to build this hard skill of how to maintain or build a payroll system with payroll schemas and so on. So this is a hard skill that after 30 years, obviously I will have just some correlation to it, and some emotional aspect to it, but nothing that I can now go into the next gen payroll project of whatever customer and be an expert or apply my development skill there. So I think kind of looking at this skills not as a static model, but more as a dynamic model from the fact that there are new skills being added, but also that these skills not something that employees and managers have from the get-go, but something they develop, and something that you really have to be intentional and put very much practice and activities and tasks and projects to further maintain and improve them. I think that makes a big difference than in the past, where I think most of the focus in talent management was around the processes, like onboarding and then the compensation and then learning and and not so much of focusing on the employee and how they're going through the journey and the skills that they're obtaining and how they're improving themselves as a person with soft skills, hard skills, with aspirations, and what David mentioned as a whole self model, as a new kind of a HR philosophy. So I think there are huge talent management trends, and the big one for me is talent management going to be superseded with talent intelligence, or are these two going to come together? And is it one replaceable with the other? For sure, you still need an HR core system and a payroll system that pays people, and that one HR core system that basically, keeps a tab of 50,000 employees, and you'll be surprised that customers of these large enterprises, they even have a hard time doing that, right? So these are kind of some of the core aspects, but then on the talent side, seeing, whether these talent processes will evolve to something like talent intelligence based on skills, based on many other AI aspects, or will it be new modules and new practices that will develop? I think time will tell. I don't know, David, do you have an opinion on the evolution of, let's say, the talent management modules as we know it from the last 10, 15 years to something we hear as talent intelligence as a whole new kind of a stack instead of module there?
I think at least the way we've seen it evolve up till now is the talent intelligence, think of it as a layer of technology that enables me to understand skills and bring some order to skills and skills management. The applications, I don't think will change that much. It's just they will be enhanced and more usable for end users because the data that they require in the form of skills is much more accurate and much more robust than it was before. So it'll open up new, I think, concepts within the talent management applications themselves to enable me as an employee to identify career opportunities or be exposed to new things that I might be able to do that I never realized I might be good at to begin with. In many cases, we get put into a position and say, okay, well, this is my job, and here is my career ladder, and it just it's basically representative of moving up different steps with the job I have today. But there may be other jobs in the organization that I'm completely unaware of that I could be really good at. And so I think, having that talent intelligence with regard to understanding who I am, but also understanding the requirements of the job itself, and then using matching technology, which is made better because the data is better to begin with. And that's, driven by the talent intelligence that makes the applications, I think, much more usable, effective, and even valuable for the end users, and the employees in the organization going forward. I think there's two other things that you mentioned, in your comments as well that I think are key. Number one is when we think about skills and skills management, it's not just to flip the switch, right? There's a lot of thought and there's a lot of setup and, conceptual things that need to go into, creating that foundation to begin with. The second one is it's not one and done. Once I get the foundation in, I need to keep it up to date on an ongoing basis. As you said, we see these terms half-life of skills, this kind of thing with all of them changing so quickly. So as companies embark on skills initiatives and implement talent intelligence platforms and those kinds of things, we need to realize that there is some work that's going to be required to get everything set up to begin with. Although AI I think will be able to vastly help that going forward. But then there is also some work that needs to be done to keep it up to date. Once again, AI will be able to help that, but it will still require people to look after it, to maintain it, to assist it going forward, to keep everything up to date.
Yeah, and maybe just as an intro to your next part, I think why a lot of people believe like the landscape, the HR landscape, will evolve drastically is because, as I mentioned on the foundation side, let's say on the system of record, that traditionally was people, now you have skills, right? So that's kind of big foundational piece for a lot of customers. Um, and then, the next layer, let's say typically that was called system of engagement, right? Where there are talent processes, like really everything that employee goes through the entire journey from, the first day of work to retiring. And then on top of it, you have this whole new system of intelligence. Prior to that, these were analytics, dashboards, BI system, which will give you some headcount stuff. Now you have an entire AI system that can, be more accessible to more people, that will generate what-if scenarios, that will simulate things for you. They will even, we're talking about AI agents, which will go to different systems, orchestrate work, and even come back with, with specific actions, always with the human in the loop, right? So this whole layer of the system of engagement, which typically is talent management or now talent intelligence, is really under pressure of major changes happening on the system of record, people and skills, and also on top, which is the system of intelligence, how it's being used, how it generates data, how it generates suggestions, how it generates simulations, what you can do with it more than just HR people. So that's why that middle piece of the application and the classical modules, I believe it's going to see a significant change over the next years with with quite a lot of innovation. So, and I think that leads us to the next question, I guess, around AI adoption and what we see there, right?
Yes. So if we could think about what's happening, what has been happening, what's happened in the past, and thinking about what is going to happen in the future towards more AI-driven solutions, what patterns, David, have you observed in terms of module transitions and stability throughout different waves of HR technology?
Yeah, I think that as we look at what the potential is, for AI, how things will transition over time and how we can, leverage some of these things, and how can we learn from the past? I think the one challenge that I've observed too many times, or so many times, when it comes to HR and technology, is that each of these new technologies that enter into the environment are seen as kind of the latest panacea, the cure-all, the thing that's really going to solve all of HR's challenges. And I think we need to keep in mind that technology itself is not necessarily the solution for everything. It's an enabler to a solution. It is a necessary component of an HR service delivery strategy. Service delivery, in my mind, being defined as how HR assembles the services and processes that serve the employees, the managers, anyone else throughout the organization. Technology is important. It's an enabler, but it still requires a specific strategy and an implementation plan. And I would say equally important, an ongoing support and maintenance plan associated with the technology implementation itself. I think too often what we've seen is, I may be diverging a little bit from the question, but I think it's important, is that, a lot of technology initiatives start, with a lot of emphasis on and a lot of excitement on what we're going to do, the value we're going to bring, and everything else. And the technology gets implemented, and then nothing gets done for the next 5 years. And so a lot of companies sit on, and are delivering to their organizations processes that were designed 5 years ago, or 3, 4, 5 years ago. They haven't updated the user interfaces and those kinds of things. And so it leads to a lot of dissatisfaction by end users saying, oh my gosh, this stuff is so outdated, it looks so ugly and everything else. It's like, well, that's because you haven't updated everything. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that whenever we talk about technology, number one, realize technology, like I said, is an enabler. It's not the end-all solution in itself. And the other one is that anytime technology gets implemented or a process gets implemented using new technologies, it has to be kept up to date, through all of the updates that the vendor is sending.
Okay, that is
Yeah.
pretty straightforward. Filip, have you got anything to add on this one?
Yeah, I mean, the current wave we're on in AI adoption with customers, and based on feedback I see from customers, because it's a lot of pushback and there's a lot of excitement, right? But there's also like, oh, okay, you know, it has to go through our ethics board, you know, our data security, data privacy team. They need to do a further investigation, and you know, they haven't done this before. So even like if you have a more non-AI system, the minute you mention AI in your pitch, in your demo, it like triggers some alarms. And this reminds me like 2012, I believe, when the cloud adoption wave was starting, and the likes of Salesforce and then SuccessFactors was born, right? Or already active. Nobody thought like, how will I trust the cloud to put my people data or like even finance data, right? And now, like 12 years afterwards, I mean, the questions that we should be putting anything on premise unless you're a government or military and you have very special reasons why to keep things, in your basement. So I think that's the level of kind of maturity of customers, of understanding and digesting the benefits and the threats and the actual issues. And with the AI, a lot of this, particularly now with LLM, because they're not the explainability, and it's not that straightforward like with the classical machine learning approach, where you can really go into the details of what the model does. It does create some uncertainty on the customer, but I think eventually, once those practices and kind of best practices are in place, we will see faster and faster adoption of AI also, not just in people scenarios, in finance scenarios, supply chain, the whole nine, the whole stack that enterprises need in order to function. So I think we're still in that excitement phase, hype phase, let's say, a lot of prototypes, a lot of the releases that have AI in there, and a lot of powerful stuff, without doubt, that vendors are putting out there. But I think there will be some early adopters with clients that go for it. Something where back in the day also, like, nobody really understood if you were using Microsoft in the cloud or if you were using on-prem, the Exchange server was hosted by IT. But at some point of time, the end users didn't notice the difference. It was the same email application that people were using, whether it was going to the cloud, that the IT folks didn't have control. I think eventually we'll get there, and I think there will be some infrastructure players that are obviously going to play a very particular role on the generative AI, like OpenAI, like other organizations that are like Meta, that will definitely have a big impact on how enterprises adopt. And then I think a lot of the software vendors are now very much excited to have customers adopt these features and have early adopters to show the value. So it's not just hype, like with any new technology that David mentioned from the beginning, and the movement from these 5 steps that we've seen, but really has a bottom line impact on efficiency, productivity, cost, and ultimately even retention when we're speaking in the HR topics.
Well, I guess each new groundbreaking tech will have its reactionaries, its Luddites. So that always happens.
Cool.
We are slowly approaching the end of our session, which was time just flew by, and we haven't covered some of the important questions. So I'd like to move on to discussing practical applications of AI. So this time, Filip, if you don't mind, I'd like to address this question to you, and then David can answer as well. For those who are just starting with AI adoption in HR, what are some practical steps to take? And could you provide some examples of basic and advanced AI applications within HR processes?
Yeah, maybe I'll turn it to David, because he's
Okay.
coming off very fresh with a lot of customers who he's seen. So let's
Sure.
give David the ability to give a couple of examples, and I think I already mentioned kind of where we are in terms of adoption.
Okay.
David, are you able to answer that, or happy to take that first?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I'm moving around a bit because there is a truck that.
Oh,
Okay,
something happening in San
seems we
Francisco.
have some Wi-Fi issues. Okay, well maybe Philip, after
Yeah,
all,
sure,
it's
no
your
problem.
turn.
So in our particular space, like, we're talking about recognition, rewards, employee communication, right? So we have very basic examples that we've seen already in the last couple of years that companies are struggling to write meaningful recognition or feedback messages. And this is also managers and employees in a lot of industries that are, not, let's say, enabled and have never been their core part of the job to do that. Yet, these messages and the feedbacks and the recognitions that are being sent out are so meaningful, not just for the receiver, but also they get shared on a social wall. Other folks in the department see it. It really creates, activates the whole culture in the company, and people can then further engage and leave their comment and so on. I mean, just like we see on LinkedIn, not just when somebody moves a new job or starts a new journey, but it really creates this viral effect of people responding to it. So having, AI tools that can tell employees and managers, what is a good message, what needs to be improved, help them, nudge and fine tune it so it has a bigger impact on the receiver, bigger impact on the department and the in context of the culture, in context of the work, in context of the behaviors and the skills that we talked a little bit earlier. I think this is where, it's a very, very low-hanging fruit that AI can improve the productivity and the effectiveness in the hands of employees. And then in terms of something that's more advanced, I think the application of AI in skills and what it can do for career paths, what it can do for workforce planning, what it can do for suggesting new programs, as budgets cycles come in, and then HR is looking at the plans for next year, and what are the things to prioritize. I mean, this is where I believe advanced AI can really help make HR more to have a superpower in them, and kind of better prioritize, better focus on the things that really matter and it can have impact on the organization. With that, David, I don't know if we still have you back, but happy to have you chime in on those basic and advanced scenarios.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, sorry. I had to relocate on my house because there was a giant truck outside that decided to park itself and make a lot of noise. So hopefully it's
It
not
happens.
as noisy as it was before. So sorry for that unexpected
No worries.
challenge. I think, if I'm following the conversation sufficiently in the question, I think when we talk about AI, we need to remember that AI is kind of like a broad encompassing term, and there's actually multiple different kinds of AI. Now, with SAP, we had identified, three main categories: conversational AI, generative AI, and then what we call deep learning AI. Each one is driven by different technologies, and each one brings different value propositions and enhancements of processes or engagement into the organization and the employee experience. So generative AI being all about generating content that end users don't have to sit around and think about anymore. It's like, with a few different prompts and information out of the system, I can actually generate content much more effectively, much more efficiently, bring in things that I never thought about before, and do it very quickly. Conversational AI, all about chatbots, digital assistants, bringing that kind of natural language-based engagement and interaction into the HR service delivery model. And then some of the things Filip was talking about with regard to deep learning AI, looking at data, evaluating data that exists in the system, finding different patterns, and then turning that information into suggestions and recommendations, and surfacing information, concepts, opportunities to an end user that they never knew existed to begin with. So I think these are all the different kinds of AI that are coming in. Each one is going to have different kinds of use cases, scenarios that are specific to each of the different end user processes that an employee is going to be using throughout their career with the organization. It could be associated with core HR and how do I make a simple employee or manager self-service scenario much more effective, or it could be all about talent and career development and how do I find new opportunities, like I keep using the example, but how do I find opportunities I didn't even know existed?
Great. I
maybe
would like to.
we could we can fast forward to the AI pricing element.
Yes, I was just thinking that. So we've talked a bit about the basic and advanced applications of AI. And now if we think about organizations that are thinking to embrace AI and they're looking at these free solutions and then there are subscriptions. So my question is, how can companies strike a balance between paying for value-added capabilities and avoiding unnecessary costs? And what are the pros and cons of embedding AI costs within existing subscriptions versus charging based on consumption?
Yeah. So you want me to take the first crack at
Go ahead.
this?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, David.
Yeah. Look, I think you're seeing multiple different models emerge. Probably the two main ones are I pay by the user. So depending on the number of users I have and the modules I'm using, I just simply have an upcharge and I can consume all I want based on that additional price I'm paying per user. The other model that seems to be emerging right now is one that's based on consumption. So I only pay for what I use, but a little bit more of a utility model. And so I think both have their attractiveness. I think subscription is probably a little bit simpler because I'm just saying, okay, I've got 10,000 users. I'm going to pay this much for my 10,000 users. I've got 5 modules, and I've got the the users associated with the modules, and it's all I can all I can drink or all I can eat with regard to the one price. Now, the challenge there, I think, is that because some of this stuff is new, you don't know what the adoption is going to be. So you could be paying for a user that will never use it or use it very sparingly. And therefore, I'm potentially overpaying quite a bit for what's there. On the consumption side, I think that gives companies much more control. And with what actually gets consumed, they're only paying for what gets used. Especially since we're early, we don't really know what the consumption rates are going to be, how often people are going to use it. Now, on the other hand, the usage could be wildly a lot more than we thought, and so that does introduce some risk as well. So I would say that these are probably the main models we'll see going forward when it comes to monetization and how vendors are going to do it. I know from an SAP perspective, we were doing it based on consumption, just so the customers would only have to pay for what they were using. Other models, I know Microsoft is using it more of a per user base as well. We'll see how some of this stuff evolves over time. But I think, like I said, those are the two main models that we see today.
Okay. Have you got time for another question?
Maybe I just want to add a quick comment. So I think this is the first time in history of HR that we have a consumption-based pricing entering let's say the HR sphere of procurement and HR in general through AI, particularly through generative AI. And I think this was the case the last 10 years for the developer side of things. So the CIO and the CTO and the developers, they were very familiar with this consumption-based pricing because this is how AWS and all these other cloud platforms work. So, whatever resource you use, this is what you pay for. And I think what we need to do, and this is all kind of more seen from a vendor perspective, I think eventually, will we ever get to a kind of an outcome-based pricing, right? I mean, ultimately, all these customers, they want to achieve outcomes, right? Feature functions, whether subscription or whether consumption, this is more kind of, the contractual metrics, but ultimately there is no really connection to the business outcome. So for example, if they're using the generative AI wildly and they're paying a lot, maybe customers are fine as long as they're achieving their business outcomes. So whatever major HR transformation, let's say they have new culture of high performance they want to achieve, and suddenly they create such a great talent density and top performers, and everybody wants to go to this company. Right? I mean, that's great. They should be paying more for this stuff in HR if that's what attracts more talent, keeps talent in the company, right? But it's driven by the outcome they've achieved. And I haven't yet seen kind of, vendors and models where, the pricing it's kind of based on the outcome, whether the baseline is subscription or consumption pricing to connect it ultimately to the end goals of customer. And yes, we do that in all these big projects and transformation. We talk about the outcomes, but somehow, to mitigate this fact of the consumption-based pricing that you're saying, hey, they could be paying quite a lot, right? Where with the subscription, you have a fixed cost. You know what you're paying the next 3 years, pretty much. I think should be justifiable if really there are the business outcomes that the customers are achieving. Then the business can always say, well, sure, it costed so much, but look at what we were able to accomplish. And again, these are how do you justify that to the CIO and the CFO and to the CEO? Ultimately, that's a big discussion. I think we will see with evolution of
I'd probably argue that consumption-based pricing would support that a little bit more effectively than just an overall user-based pricing, in that I don't have to boil the ocean to begin with. And that, this kind of gets into how to implement AI and some of these things as well. It's like, look for the things that are going to be, the quick, easy wins. Where are the biggest pain points? Look for some ROI and that kind of thing, and focus on those. You don't need to, your vendor is going to start delivering this stuff in increasing quantities and probably in increasing timeframes as well. Decreasing timeframes. And so it's going to come as a flood. But pick and choose the ones where you're most comfortable, where you can get it past your privacy experts, your AI experts in the organizations. Look for some of those quick wins, both from an end user engagement perspective, but also a business outcome perspective as well. And like I said, I do think the consumption model fits that a little bit better, because in this case, I can start small, I can only pay for what I'm going to use, and I can kind of grow with it over time.
Do you mind if we squeeze in another question?
Sure. Sure.
Great, thank you. It's about measuring the value of AI, and I think a lot of organizations would like to know that. How can they measure the true value of AI? And for example, in recruiting, how does better content creation lead to finding better candidates and improving overall hiring outcome?
So I think this is a tough one, frankly, because I think that now in recruiting, we've seen the concept of AI and talent intelligence, out there for a few years. So there are some, well-documented ROI cases that a lot of some of the talent intelligence vendors, with an emphasis on recruiting, have come up with. So there are some examples there. However, if you look at some of the other AI-related scenarios that are there, ChatGPT, the foundation for what we use in generative AI, it hasn't even been in existence that long. I think it's just a little over a year, 3 or 4 months or something. We're going to learn as we go ahead, and so some of this as we build ROI and look for the efficiencies and what does automation bring and that kind of thing. Obviously, it starts with, okay, well, how bad are we today? And what does that future state look like? And so if we can reduce the time to hire, if we can find better candidates, if we can reduce attrition because employees are finding new opportunities in the organization instead of going outside to look for new opportunities to further their career. If we can see an increase in skills that are there, either the documenting the skills or just general upskilling and reskilling, bringing in new skills into the organization, I think these are some of the cues that we're going to start looking for. But I would say, outside of recruiting, much of this is still kind of new. And so we're going to learn as we go. We'll start seeing some of these value considerations, the different metrics, ROI calculations going forward. But I think, if nothing else, just look at, an example of a job description, using generative AI to create a job description, it's like, how long does it take somebody to do it today? And more importantly, what is the accuracy of that job description? And now compare it to how fast it can be done with generative AI and how much more comprehensive and accurate that may be, as opposed to the manager trying to think of what a job description should be, or using a template that could be 5 years out of date, to build a job description to begin with.
Very good.
Great. Thank you, Filip. Anything to add here?
I mean, for me, ultimately, for companies, they, if they're growing with their end customers, if they have more success in the market, that's mostly, due to their people. So, I mean, ultimately, the business case and the outcome is what the company is doing in the market, and if that's largely the success and the happiness of their end customers will be through the success and the happiness of their own employees. And I think we see a lot of these employee engagement metrics in a lot of the annual surveys, and that kind of stuff everybody tracks and even has to be published in reports. But for me, the ultimate signal of if something is really working in the people side of technologies is ultimately the stakeholders and the success on the market for that particular customer. And your people are the enablers for that success. And all these important KPIs and aspects that David mentioned that are related to HR are kind of a vehicle to show that the company is growing and that you have more success in the market. So that's my 2 cents to connect to more the pragmatic view that David mentioned on what to measure.
And also, it very much depends on the organizational goals. For example, if the goal is to increase diversity of candidates, there are AI tools that can screen the job descriptions and find words that are not welcoming or that are encouraging groups and so on. Okay.
Exactly. Like you said, ROI calculation always starts with what you're doing today and where the opportunity is to improve. So understand where some of the pain points are, some of the inefficiencies are, where some of the opportunities are, and then make some potential calculations there.
Okay, so the time is up. I would like to close this session unless you have final 2 cents to add.
My real pleasure to have David full circle from, I think, 30 years now, is it, or 25 years at least that we've met, and great to have you on this show and talk about the history and the new trends and what customers can do with these new technologies we see, whether on what I mentioned, the new system of record with skills, or on the new system of intelligence with AI. And then how the applications are going to evolve. I think that was really very good and very appreciative from my side, and we look forward to engage with you in your post SAP and to also reimagine yourself in your next steps. I think we very looking forward to how we can continue the collaboration as well.
Yeah, just want to thank you for the invitation to speak to everybody today. It was great to engage, answer some questions, and hopefully your listeners took away a couple of ideas and action items that we were able to share today. So thanks for the invitation, appreciate it, and it's been great.
Thank you both.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joa, for hosting us.
Thank you, Filip. Right, so I wanted to say a few words.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
No worries, just a minute to close off. So as we've discussed today, AI will heavily influence talent management. It will enable employees to shape their career trajectories and shape a future of personalized development. However, navigating this shift requires understanding and learning from the past. As what David said, the AI tools will enable, and we still need to figure out how to use them in our own best benefit. And another good news is that AI is not only for the tech giants, but they are going to be widely applied by a range of organizations, small and big. And in conclusion, HR technology is transforming the way we manage talent. And if we embrace it with a strategic plan, we are going to unlock a future of empowered employees. And with that, I will finish and thank you all for attending today. Bye-bye.
Okay, the summary. Bye.
Bye.